Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on the failure of a petition seeking to oust Premier Smith. But first, pitching party renewal.
We're not going to win it tomorrow, but we are going to shift what's politically possible, and we are going to build the excitement and the energy that we need to win.
Avi Lewis campaigning in the nation's capital, one of 5 candidates vying for leadership of the federal NDP with online voting now underway, and the winner to be announced March 29th. And Avi Lewis joins us now. Hello, Mr. Lewis. Welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Hi, Michael. It's great to be with you.
All right. You're campaigning on building a party for the 99%. What does that translate to where direction of the NDP is concerned?
You know, we obviously are coming off the worst result in our history in the last election. Our campaign has been focused on the cost of living crisis, what we call the everyday emergency of just trying to get by in an impossible economy. Canadians are facing sky-high grocery prices, the price of cell phone plans, rent and mortgages. It just keeps going up and up and up. And we actually think there's a lot of money in this country. 6 big banks made $70 billion last year. There's no shortage of money. Prime Minister has plans to spend hundreds of billions on the military in the next decade. There's a mood for big projects in Canada right now with the world coming unraveled, war and threat of annexation from the United States. We need to stay focused on what everyday Canadians need to get by and to actually create solutions as big as these crises that we face that would slash the cost of living for Canadians. So we've been proposing things like a public option for groceries and cell phone plans and some new industries, clean manufacturing and other industries that would actually put people to work as the economy is majorly challenged right now on all fronts.
Okay, on that point of money, you're the front runner in this race from the standpoint of fundraising, more than double that of Edmonton MP Heather McPherson. What is it about your platform you feel that it's resonating with party members, creating a degree of momentum, certainly?
Well, we've been seeing a lot of people come out since the fall, and the crowds are growing, and the sense of momentum is growing. And I think it is like that we're experimenting in our campaign and just straight talk. Canadians are kind of tired of politicians crafting the right message to kind of not offend anybody but not say anything at the same time. So we've been really forthright about the solutions that we're proposing to the crises we face. And speaking to the fact that Canadians are fearful these days. I mean, the war that's been unleashed by the United States and Israel in the Middle East is terrifying. The price of oil is spiking. And as we've seen, and Albertans know better than anyone, the big 5 oil companies will make a lot of money in the next couple of years, but also that'll drive inflation. We know from the great economist Jim Stanford that almost half of the last inflation crisis a few years ago was driven by sky-high oil prices. That could be worse this time. We need a government that actually protects Canadians. That's why we're calling for a public option for groceries. That's why we're calling for major investments to not just like fix our broken healthcare system, but to extend it. Eyes, teeth, mental health, medicine, all part of your health should be part of our healthcare system. We need a Canadian shield made of Canadian steel, which we can't sell to the United States because of tariffs, to protect our economy from the United States and restore our economic independence. So that looks like a 21st century grid for electricity, renewable energy across this country, which, you know, nobody ever blew up a refinery full of sunlight. There are different ways to build into the future of a Canadian economy that cuts people's household bills, that slashes our emissions and deals with the climate crisis and gets us off this boom and bust roller coaster and onto a solid plane of economic independence for Canada.
From that federal political dynamic right now, the latest from pollster Nick Nanos points to the Liberals having the biggest lead they've had in months, 11 points over the Conservatives, but that 11%, that's also the degree of support the NDP has in total. What does polling like that reflect about where the NDP is at the moment from your standpoint?
Well, certainly in the last election, we lost votes to the Conservatives and we lost votes to the Liberals. And that's why we've been laser focused on the cost of living emergency. I mean, you know, we pay mobile data rates that are in some cases 1,000 times what people in Finland pay. right? Because we have three telecommunications giants, Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. Worst customer service anywhere. I don't blame the service representatives, but the companies are squeezing us for more and more money, and they're squeezing their employees for longer and longer wait times. You could watch your life drain out while you wait on hold to just change something in your cell phone plan. We actually need solutions that will win us back conservative voters and liberal voters, and something like a public option for cell phones. In Saskatchewan, they still have SaskTel. They have lower cell phone plans than anywhere else. In fact, a few years ago, Rogers, TELUS, and Bell had to lower their prices by 40% in Saskatchewan, around 40%, just to compete with a public option for an essential service in the 21st century. We need that kind of thing federally. We've got the money and the know-how to do it, but we have to put the everyday Canadians' bills first instead of big projects that will increase profits for a handful of corporations and won't trickle down to consumers. We really need the same fix with the housing crisis. We got to fix these problems directly. We believe the federal government ought to be doing that. And that's going to bring back voters from both federal liberals and conservatives. At least that's the plan.
All right, let me ask you this. How does Alberta fit into your frame of reference for a rejuvenated NDP? We're a province right now embroiled in a whole lot of discussion and debate around the prospect of a referendum on separation.
Yeah, I mean, Alberta is central to Canada's future in so many ways. And I think the Premier has been extremely irresponsible, pretending not to, but effectively stoking this separation movement, which I think is MAGA aligned and potentially U.S. funded. I think it's very unhealthy and divisive. I've got a lot of time for Naheed Nenshi and have spoken with him in the course of this campaign saying, thank you for standing up against the use of the notwithstanding clause against workers, against trans kids. I think an Alberta NDP government would be a wonderful thing. I think it would deal with this inflated but still serious threat from the separatist movement. And I think to hold Canada together, we need to just stop focusing on all of this noise and put Canadians' daily lives back under the microscope and say, when people are struggling to pay their bills amid all this wealth being generated in a province like Alberta, we need new plans to make people's lives better. I was standing in a field in Edmonton with a fellow named Mark Doran just a couple of weeks ago beside a pump jack that was at the end of its life, that had been downloaded to a little company, a garbage company called MAGA, that it collects all of these wells at the end of their lives, and the responsibility for cleaning up hundreds of thousands of wells at the end of their lives from the conventional oil industry in Alberta. If we made polluters pay, which something like 90% of Albertans support, would create decades of good jobs for the very same oil and gas workers that have been laid off from the industry, 40,000 of them since the last boom, where the oil and gas industry has figured out how to make a barrel of oil with 45% fewer workers. We need a future for oil and gas workers in Alberta, like we need a future for workers all over this country in new industries and new projects like a reclamation boom, where we actually make those companies, which have made hundreds of billions of dollars from our common resources, pay their fair share to clean up the most beautiful province in this country. And that's the kind of new idea that we want to bring to Canadians. And Alberta is right in the center of every major issue facing this country.
All right, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, Mr. Lewis. Thank you.
Great talking to you. Thank you.
That's federal NDP leadership candidate Avi Lewis. From failing recall petitions and what's to come of the Forever Canadian campaign to another federal floor crossing. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, political analyst John Santos and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity and a longtime broadcast journalist in Alberta. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with a campaign to recall the Premier, falling well short of its goal. But the organizer behind it says it was never about the signatures.
We started a conversation not just within our community, but within our province. And lo and behold, within our whole country, it started a conversation. The conversation was a call for humanity and accountability, and in that we hit the jackpot.
It was one of more than 20 recall petitions against members of the UCP government, many focusing on the government's use of the notwithstanding clause, while others say it was because MLAs are hard to reach or dismissive of their concerns. Only 5 petitions remaining, including one against an Edmonton NDP MLA. John, another petitioner who's fallen well short, in this case gathering 2,300 signatures of roughly 12,000 needed, but also claiming a degree of success. Is there success here? And if so, how might that translate?
So I don't think anyone's surprised that these petitions are failing. And to some extent, it's understandable that they're going to frame it as a success. Oh, it wasn't really about trying to actually get the MLA recalled. And as long as they take the training for organizers, some of the contacts that they make during the petition drive, and parlay that into action and organization in the actual election next year, then it will have been a useful exercise for them. But it requires, retaining the volunteers that were involved in that infrastructure and that organization, and applying it to the election for all of these petition efforts to be counted as some kind of a success.
Don, the petitions are proving to be of little threat to the MLAs targeted, the Premier included. So if there is something for the government to take away from an exercise it opened the door to, what might that takeaway be?
Well, 2 things. I'm going to agree with John Santos that there's a learning curve here, and I think the activists, let's call them for what they are, may need to take a few things away from this pest-type approach to politics. And I think that's what the government is going to look at this for what it is. These are a bunch of pests taking a lot of people, whipping up the crowd, and doing what they do, and then they'll retreat into whatever burrow that they came out of and say, well, we didn't see our shadow this year, but we'll have an early spring. Now, I'm talking nonsense, of course, and that's what I'm trying to get at. At the end of the day, we do not have any more time for antics. Things are really getting serious, not just in the province or the country, but in the world. And I know we're going to talk a bit about Avi Lewis a little later, but let's just get real, folks. Let's not be pests anymore. Let's work together.
All right. Speaking of petitions, the successful Forever Canadian campaign will now be reviewed by a committee of MLAs, organized by former Deputy Premier Thomas Lukaszuk to counter separation efforts. The Citizen Initiative gathered more than 450,000 signatures from Albertans who want to remain in Canada. The government House leaders signaled Monday a bipartisan committee of 6 MLAs, 4 from the UCP and 2 from the opposition NDP will review the petition to determine next steps. Don, when the Premier appeared on Alberta Primetime last month, she said the process of dealing with this would come up during the spring sitting. What kind of responsibility do you see now resting on the shoulders of these 6 MLAs from either side of the floor?
I think in a way, as I scratch my forehead, which I won't do, I think this is an opportunity to do what the Fair Deal panels were attempting to do, was to gauge what Albertans are actually thinking. Let's go back a couple steps to Thomas Lukaszuk, who at one time was referred to as the hood ornament in the legislature by no other person than Brian Mason, a former NDP MLA. I want to get at the petition itself. It was actually one of these things in the middle of the summer is, do you love your mother or don't you? And you didn't have to show ID, and you didn't have to do anything. And of course, unless you're pathological, you have to like your mother. Okay, so now we're getting down to the clear strokes of what does it mean to be in Canada? What does it mean to be coming up in October when there's going to be a provincial election in Quebec, and where the heir apparent here, the PQ, is saying we will have another referendum. They just declared a constitution in the National Assembly in Quebec, and we here in Alberta continue to get slings and arrows tossed our way because somehow we're un-Canadian. I think this is an opportunity for Premier Smith to tell the country and perhaps join with Quebec to say, this isn't working, we need to come to the table honestly and talk this through, or maybe we're going to have to see a mediator like they do in divorce counseling, marriage counseling. I'll leave it at that.
John, what kind of path do you see this review committee paving where the October referendum is concerned, and how the issue of separation might factor into the lengthy list of questions?
As Don said, I hope that they take this as an opportunity to actually come up with a question that is constitutional and that is clear. And, you know, as we're moving towards the fall referendum this year, where the government has their basket of questions that they want to ask Albertans, we're almost certainly going to see something on Alberta's place within Canada that's going to be not the Forever Canadian question that they petitioned on, and not the separation question that the separatists may or may not get enough signatures to get certified. And I think, yeah, the fact that they've struck a committee to actually take a serious look at this and to take time and effort to get a question that is clear is a good sign, and hopefully it produces something that is clear that Albertans can vote on and finally put this issue to bed and deal with the many other very, very serious issues that the government should be dealing with and prioritizing.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, another federal floor crossing, this time from the NDP. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Another MP has crossed the floor, this time from the New Democrats.
Like with any complicated issue, it wasn't just one thing that happened. There are a variety of many things that have allowed me to really reflect on this, and I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed.
The Prime Minister walked Lori Idlout, who is Nunavut's only MP, into her first Liberal caucus meeting this morning. The latest floor crossing moves the Carney Liberal government to within 2 seats of a majority, with 3 by-elections now set for April 13th. John, the slow march to a Liberal majority, how likely is this latest floor crossing to silence any chatter of a snap federal election?
Quite frankly, I'm surprised that we continued to have chatter about an early election, because it looked like Mark Carney was going to be able to accomplish what he wanted, which is get a majority government without having to go to the polls again. And I just have to remind viewers that this is an entirely, appropriate, historically, it's not without precedent, right? This is how parliamentary democracy works. And floor crossings happen between parties all the time, and this is, the people who sort of get their knickers in a knot over this, it has more to do with whether their side is gaining from the floor crossing or losing from it, right? And so, yeah, this is just part of how parliamentary democracy works, and the fact that Carney's been able to get floor crossers means that, that in conjunction with the upcoming by-elections, he doesn't need a general election to get a majority.
Don, surprised, though, to see an NDP MP crossing to the Liberals just a couple of weeks before New Democrats determine leadership of their party. What's it signal to you?
I'm not at all surprised. And I'm surprised that more NDP members have not crossed the floor to the Liberals. A colleague of mine, when I worked at the CBC a long time ago, called the NDP Liberals in a hurry. Now, hang on to that thought. Now, if you think of our Prime Minister, the current one, as the best Conservative Prime Minister the Liberals ever had, what you've got now is the centre. The politics have moved toward the centre. The honourable member from Nunavut probably was listening very carefully to what the heir apparent Avi Lewis, or for that matter, Heather McPherson, were saying from 30,000 feet compared to what's going on the ground. And I think the honourable member made the correct decision as a Liberal in a hurry.
John, our conversation with NDP leadership candidate Avi Lewis off the top, it was recorded ahead of this floor crossing development, so we didn't get a chance to ask him about that. But what do you make of his message? Is it a campaign pitch that you see selling with a traditional NDP base?
I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's a very interesting pivot for somebody who authored the LEAP manifesto. You know, he's pivoted from a very, you know, like solidly left environmentalist stance previously, and is now shifting more to like a retail politics, populist left, you know, champion of the common person type position. And that, of course, is where Heather McPherson had positioned her campaign from the get-go. So it's quite interesting. And I think it shows that even the sort of committed intellectual ideologues within the NDP understand that, you know, the playbook from 10 years ago isn't going to work. And they need to shift, if not actually to the center, in a substantive sense, at least adapt their style and their messaging to be less esoteric and intellectual and ideologically committed and more targeted towards retail politics and the average person.
Don, how much of a fit do you see Avi Lewis being with party supporters in this province? He told us he has a lot of time for Naheed Nenshi, and the stance the Alberta NDP has on things like being against the government's use of the notwithstanding clause.
I'm channeling my father. My father, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was a miner for 37 years and a union steward. And I'm channeling my mother, who was in the retail sector and trying to lead a union to its first contract. In fact, the store closed before they allowed that to happen. So I'm channeling them right now, okay? And they're saying, what are you people talking about? This is mindless trash. You need to get back. You need to be taken out in the back shed. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't talk like that because somehow somebody might get offended. I think this is an opportunity for Mr. Lewis and company to go away before they kill the party completely. And I think what's happened with the transfer of the honorable member from Nunavut to the Liberal Party, I think we're looking at common sense right now. I'm going to shift just a little bit, just a tiny bit. I'm expecting some Conservative members to also see the light and move toward the Liberals so we have a majority government, because I don't think anybody in Canada right now, anybody the sane anyway, wants to have an election. I think John might agree with me on that one. John, have I got that right?
Well, you know what? And John, we have less than 30 seconds, but how do you see Lewis faring against Edmonton MP Heather McPherson?
I mean, all signs suggest that he's going to win. Like, he has the lead in fundraising, but winning is just half the battle. Like, it's the real battle for him and the NDP is to get organized and to rebuild the party, and that involves you know, kind of mirroring what the Conservatives did on the right side, and that's becoming more pragmatic and appearing to be willing to work with the Liberals.
To be real.
All parties, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I hate pulling the plug. We're out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. Good to see you, Michael. Bye-bye.
Loves to make music. All dressed up in his bow tie, this sweet musician happily plays away. Good job. Some of Misha's other favorite things to do are going for walks, riding in his motorized Jeep, and kicking his soccer ball. What's this? Born in 2015, Misha also treasures one-on-one time. He shows his affection by holding hands or sitting close. Can you do high five? At school, Misha is known for his curiosity and his big heart. His teachers say he's always ready to help, even pushing classmates in their wheelchairs. Here we go. This precious boy deserves a forever family that will treasure and love him unconditionally. For more information, go online to alberta.ca/Wednesdays-child.
Proudly supported by CTV.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about former NDP MP Laurie Idlout crossing the floor to the Liberals. Tim says, well, this is very interesting indeed. JW writes, how can anyone be okay with this? Think of the precedent this sets. Voting is now meaningless. Politics is now about finding and recruiting sellouts. Faz thinks Conservatives are angry because MPs are crossing to the Liberal side and not theirs like during Harper. And Chief thinks if they want to cross floors, they should run a by-election and let their constituency decide. This is not fair at all. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, from replacing key feeder mains to contention over tax increases announced in the provincial budget, we'll have a conversation with Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas. That's on Thursday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.